Go from one phase of your career to another. It takes some navigating, it takes some effort, but it's okay. You have permission to do so. One of the things I've learned throughout my career is that, trust the process. Just do a little something every day, and over time, that'll pay off. Don't be afraid to talk to others. Ask for support, ask for advice. Let others help you understand yourself better.
Hello, everyone. It's AJ, your host, and welcome to another episode of Code 3 Life Reinvented. My guest today is someone I've known for quite some time, and I think we might get into our friendship origin story here in a minute. But he is someone that I think embodies a lot of what we talk about when we talk about what we're doing at More and people at Crossroads and designing a career that matches who you are now and finding that level of alignment with your career and life that is really tied to who you are authentically. And that is so much what we talk about on this show. So I'm excited to bring my guest in, Eric Riemer. Welcome to Code 3 Life Reinvented, sir.
Thanks, AJ. Nice to see you.
It's great to see you. We used to live really close to each other, and then I had to go up and move across the country, but it's nice to see you on the podcast today. I call this podcast Code 3 because I had a couple of them, as you know, a couple of Widowmakers, and the Code 3 is an homage and a tip of the hat to being in the ambulance for the second one, and when they called in a Code 3 for me. I call this podcast Code 3 because I wonder if people have had their own Code 3 moment. Where did they have a health event or some awakening? It doesn't have to be as dramatic as a heart attack, but just some moment where they're like, I don't know, this isn't it. My status quo is a resounding status no. Did you have anything like that?
I think I had several. But I would say I had a couple of health issues as well 5-6 years ago that weren't quite as dramatic as yours and life-threatening, but certainly had some heart issues of my own. And I think that's one of the things we bonded over. That was one of those kind of life is short. I would say another was, the passing of both my parents over the past several years. And another pivotal moment where, there's a lot of sorrow and grief. And another one of those moments where it's also a chance to kind of pause and reflect on what my life has been and what I want it to be going forward.
What were some of those big aha moments for you? What was the clarity that came?
I think that this was something that was happening gradually over time throughout my career, which is that since moving out to the West Coast after college, I just fell in love with the area. And conservation and the environment were always very important to me. And there were things that I was involved in, but it wasn't sort of core to my career or to how I spent my time. I had a fairly successful career. I was in financial roles, financial planning roles throughout my career, and worked in financial services in San Francisco for many, many years. Was able to support my family that way. But I think over time, that went from being really, really exciting and new and interesting to being something that I was doing to make a living, and then maybe to something where I was having a little bit of a hard time getting out of bed sometimes in the morning and motivating to go to work. It just got to the point where it didn't feel like what I was doing for my career fit who I was as a person. That connection wasn't as strong as it had been earlier in my career. And that was a progression. And I think that, around maybe 2017, 2018 was around the time that I started to realize that there was some misalignment there. And then some of those life events pushed me forward in a way that without them would not have occurred. It was a gradual, slow change up until then, if that makes sense. In other words, I didn't wake up one day and see the light. It was kind of coming at me. And then one day it kind of smacked me.
Yeah, for sure. And that happens, right? Like you talk about misalignment, and that's such a magic word where we're just not connected. Our daily actions and our pursuits, our career endeavors don't match who we are. Mm-hmm. Maybe at one point, but now they don't. And then you start feeling like, what is this? And I think the right word that you said is misalignment. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, when you say you couldn't get out of bed, I can relate to that. And I've talked about that on a previous episode of the show. When I was in a really bad misaligned situation and I was pulled in emotionally and otherwise in a bunch of different directions. What was that like for you? Because I don't think we're the only people who've experienced this.
I think at the root of it, AJ, it was that it takes to have a career in anything. It takes a lot of passion. It takes a lot of intensity, and it takes a lot of hard work. And when that starts to slip, it can be really tough to get out of bed in the morning. I was like many of us, I had a long commute, so I was getting up very early and getting home late at night. That can be tough to do day after day. I think for me, it was not having that passion anymore. I think that was the root of it. To me, what was missing.
When that passion dips, like what were the steps you took?
First of all, I felt this pull towards conservation work, protecting the environment, where I felt like my passions really were. And one of the things I did was I went to a nonprofit board match event that was in San Francisco and was sponsored by a company we work for, Charles Schwab. I had a short list of organizations that I was interested in talking to and thinking that maybe I could become a volunteer or become an advisor and eventually join a board. After work one day, I walked into this large conference hall with hundreds of booths and all these organizations and a lot of people milling about. And the first one I walked up to was Yosemite Rivers Alliance. And it was love at first sight. I loved what they did. I met the executive director. We hit it off. I ended up becoming an advisor. And so that was one of the things I did to start the pivot, to start to feel like, oh, this is something that's really me, that I can really sink my teeth into.
And you were still at Schwab and you got involved as an advisor with something you're really, really passionate about and still are. So you're doing this on the side. And I think a lot of people would do that. They'd pursue a passion project or get involved on a board, just like you did. You still got to get up and go to work and do that commute, which for me was an hour and a half each way. Tell us more. What happened from there?
I realized fairly quickly that there was a certain knowledge base I was missing that if I really wanted to be an effective advisor, I needed. And so I enrolled in a certificate program through Harvard University. It was a virtual program. Over the course of the next couple of years, I got a certificate in environmental policy. I focused some of my courses on clean energy, but also on watershed management and water policy. That really gave me a really good base for becoming a more effective advisor going forward, but it was also really interesting material and I loved learning it. So I was spending, the evenings and weekends reading, working on projects, writing papers for the course of a couple of years. And that was one of the things that started to kind of propel me more in that direction. That was one. The other was in 2018, I decided to take a mid-career sabbatical. So I left Schwab after 13-ish years and took 6 months off and focused on my coursework and just focused on kind of regrouping a little bit and thinking about what I may want to do next.
When you approached Schwab for your mid-career sabbatical, did you feel like you were committing some sort of suicidal career move at all? How'd that go?
It was one of those kind of outer body experiences where I couldn't believe that I was having this conversation. And I had a manager who was very supportive. We had a good conversation about it and decided that it made the most sense. And so we were able to make it work out. And so it ended up being one of those things where the fear of it, and this is one of the things that I've learned through your programs, the fear that I had around it was greater than once I actually went through with it, the actuality of making the change. It ended up being a positive change for me.
Yeah. Good old fear. The acronym is future experiences already ruined, right? When the fear gets
Exactly.
in our head and we haven't even done anything yet. And we're already telling ourselves it's going to be awful.
Exactly.
You eventually leave Schwab and you were an early customer of More when we launched our first career coaching, group coaching program. It's held over 13 weeks. There were 9 meetings, 7 in plenary in the group, and 2 one-on-ones with the coach that was leading that effort. What for you came out of that experience?
It was really pivotal in many ways. By that time, I had gone back to work as in more of a consultant role. I was doing finance consulting for firms around the Bay Area. I enjoyed the flexibility, the autonomy that came with being a consultant, but it still wasn't my thing. I was still doing it in order to pay the bills, as it were. Through More, I joined Career Crossroads and went through the program. I think it was maybe the first program. It really helped me to evolve from this kind of vague sense of what I wanted to do next into a much more concrete, tangible vision with a set of goals. It really set me on a different course than I had been on previously.
Let's talk about that new course you were on and how you were thinking about things.
There's always a sense that, there may be things out there that could be more interesting or fulfilling for me, but immediately the mind goes to the place of here are all the reasons why that is not possible, right? And kind of keeps you on the course you're on. I think more did a couple things for me. It gave me permission to explore different avenues. And that was through a couple things. I think a lot of the self-exploration, a lot of the curriculum, but also just meeting other people who were maybe not in the same situation exactly, but pretty darn close, and feeling a lot of the same emotions, a lot of the same, going through the same thing, maybe kind of mid-career, maybe starting to feel like there may be something else for them out there. And just to be able to kind of have those conversations with some of the other participants and commiserate a bit, that was one of the key things.
I believe that transformation is best supported through a community of people who are walking the same path together. So, full disclosure to the listeners, Eric introduced me to a nonprofit based out of San Francisco called the Via Heart Project. It's doing phenomenal work in putting defibrillators throughout Northern California and schools, and we used to do free heart screenings in association with local healthcare districts. I'm not sure exactly where they are now. I'm off the board now, but I remember specifically we were driving into the city for a board meeting. You would pick me up and we were just having a conversation, kind of a lot like this one.
Mm-hmm.
I'll never forget it. We were literally halfway across the Golden Gate Bridge in between the two towers. And you were talking about this notion of a portfolio career and how, yes, the work through more had opened your mind to it, but you had sort of gotten your head around that this could be something great. Like you'd had this, at least where I sat, I looked at you, like had this really great, successful career doing financial planning and analysis, at least where we overlap, at a very well-known firm that pays the very good compensation, all the things. And now you're looking at, gosh, I might actually portfolio design my next move, right? Do you remember that?
That was a step in the process, I think, to where I am now. It was the notion that there may not just be a single thing that checks all the boxes, right? At the time, I was consulting. I was now by this time I was on the board of Yosemite Rivers Alliance, and I was also on the board of Via Heart. So the notion was that there may have to be multiple ways in which I'm achieving this kind of next level of fulfillment. So I think at the time I was still in a bit of an evolution. That's how I was framing it, and that was helping me to kind of free up and I think see different pathways forward.
This is one of the reasons why I was so excited that you were willing to come on the show, because I think what we're diving into here is really relevant for those who are contemplating a move or feeling this feeling of numbness or numb success, as I call it, and that sense of joy and fulfillment and purpose and passion Eric talked about a while ago. It's drifting, it's missing. And you're just showing up every day, but that sense of aliveness is not coursing through the veins, as it were. But you did something, I think, courageous. Like you started to build something that was a portfolio and look at things totally differently than you would, I'm guessing, had looked at your career and how to make money and, manage your finances and put bread on the table and all those things.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really powerful lesson that we can learn from you, Eric.
There are a couple of things I got out of Career Crossroads that were really important for me.
And by the way, that was the MORE course, the Career Crossroads.
There were a couple of really important things that came out of it, because it may look different for different people. Some people may be comfortable stopping one career one day and starting up another one the next. For me, it had to be more of a gradual transition. That's just the kind of person that I am. There are a couple of things that through Career Crossroads, I was able to realize, and this is what really helped me. Number one is this notion that a part of the program was taking those limiting factors, those things that hold you back, identify those, and then flip them on their head. So like literally take the opposite of them and make that a belief about yourself. So I'll give you a couple of examples. One was that I'm too risk averse. There's too much kind of fear of the unknown for me to just stop doing one thing one day and start doing something else the next. That's just not who I am. I'm a little bit more deliberate. It takes me longer to make changes in my personal life. So where I was able to turn that around is to realize that I'm actually really good at self-regulating. I can take a little bit of risk, knowing that I'm not going to go to Vegas and put it all on red. I'm not going to do something catastrophically stupid, financially or otherwise. The Career Crossroads program kind of gave me permission to, in the way I needed to, kind of start toe dipping a bit, moving in a certain direction. And that's that's where that portfolio approach for me really worked. It wasn't doing a wholesale change overnight. It was making that change gradually over time and seeing what felt right. And another thing was that, you have to be, again, kind of passionate and aggressive and go all in if you're going to make these types of changes. And I had some self doubt about whether or not I was really up for it. And where I was able to kind of see the flip side of that is that I'm not going to be somebody who, I'm not a bull in the china shop type of person. I'm much more comfortable in kind of like support roles and, helping others. But knowing that about myself, I'm also adaptable. I'm comfortable working with all different types of people. And I generally find myself able to work successfully in different types of environments. So I don't have to feel like, again, I've got to burn everything down and start all over again. I can make these changes gradually over time in a way that works for me.
And that fit with your risk profile, and you knew this about yourself, that the Band-Aid off wholesale change may not be quite what is in alignment with who you are as an individual, but you took a slower, measured approach, found which ultimately led to the role you have now, right? And your relationship with the Yosemite River Alliance has changed just a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So I completed Career Crossroads program through Moore, and I think it was the spring of 2024. I'd had this period of many, many years of thinking I want to do something different, kind of pivoting to consulting, being on the board of Yosemite Rivers Alliance, taking this kind of portfolio approach. And then March 2024-ish, finished up the Career Crossroads program. And then I couldn't believe when I look back at the timeline, I couldn't believe how quickly this happened. But in July of 2024, Yosemite Rivers Alliance was looking for somebody to fill a CFO, COO role, and asked me if I could help identify that person. It took a little bit of time, but I eventually realized that it was a role that I could fill on an interim basis and would give me a lot of what I was looking for. An organization that's doing work that I care passionately about, working with people who are dedicated to preserving the greater Yosemite region, working within the watersheds, doing stream restoration, doing meadow restoration, educating local communities about the importance of healthy rivers and watersheds. And it was exactly what I was looking for. And maybe that was another aha moment when I realized that, oh my gosh, this role that they've asked me to help identify the person for, this is exactly what I'm looking for.
When you left Schwab to when you assumed the role of CFO at the River Alliance, how long was that?
6 years. Yeah, I was thinking about the Hemingway quote. I don't know if this is quite right. I'm going to butcher it. And change happens slowly over time and then all at once. It seemed to me like it happened all at once. Like, oh my gosh, I went from one day seeking that perfect opportunity for me. And suddenly I was able to, work with the board and work with the executive director to make it happen. And it just seemed to happen overnight. But in actuality, looking back at the timeline, it was about 6 years in the works.
It's a great example of something that doesn't happen overnight, right? You didn't burn it all down and then the next day start something new. You took a measured approach. You tried a few things. You were doing some consulting. You were sitting on boards or as an advisor to the board until you found something that really aligned with who you are. And I just think that is very inspirational. I've taken a lot of inspiration from your story and just how you've taken the steps that you did that worked for you to get to where you are now. And so when we talk about Eric now, how is he feeling about everything? How are you defining success for you or fulfillment? And how is that different than 6 years ago?
I'll answer it by giving an example. One of the things that came out of the Career Crossroads program through Moore was that I want my 2 daughters, I want to feel like they see what I'm doing for work and that they are inspired by me and respectful of that. That was one of my goals coming out of Moore was if I look at myself through their eyes, what would they want to see? Now I'm in a CFO role at a river conservation group that I care passionately about. My older daughter has a degree in environmental science as well and is working as a fellow in Southern California. And one of the coolest things happened a few months ago after she had started AJ is we've started collaborating with each other over work.
No way. So that's great.
So she emails me things from her work. I send her things from my work that she may be interested in. We chat about it. To me, if I could give one specific example of the change, it's that my daughter and I are actually now work colleagues, which to me is kind of just about the coolest thing and was very unexpected. But taking a little bit of a step back, I would just say that it just feels like I'm where I need to be. I don't have any doubts about it. Working at a nonprofit is very challenging. The pay is not very good, but I was able to arrange a somewhat flexible schedule to kind of, offset some of that. And again, that was part of what I got out of the Career Crossroads program, is kind of creating the role that was going to fit for me in my life right now. It feels like where I need to be, doing the work I need to be doing with the people I should be with. And then being able to collaborate with my daughter is just kind of, that's the icing on the cake.
Well, I want to go back to your comment about looking at yourself through the eyes of your daughters, your two children, right? Because I think for a lot of people, and I'll put myself in this camp, climbing the corporate ladder in financial services, specifically asset and wealth management, I thought I was modeling something for my kids. Dad was getting up early before anyone was awake, was on the 6:30 ferry or 7:10 at the latest in the morning into the office. And I'd come back and hopefully get there just as dinner hit the table. That was really important to me, basically a non-negotiable unless I was traveling or something, or there was a real crisis in the office. But I was like, well, my kids are looking up to me and seeing me as this person who's providing. And Dad goes away 5 days a week and he comes home and we have bread on the table. Did you have that feeling too when you were at Schwab? Like, I've got a steady job. This is a firm that is very well known and has a great reputation. Like, if you could go back in time to 6-7 years ago, maybe at your tail end of Schwab or at some point in Schwab, were you like, this is what it is? View of the lens through your kids, I think, is kids' eyes is really interesting. I just want to see if we go back in time and compare how it was for you.
At the time, it was, I was where I needed to be at the time, right? By the way, since we said Schwab by name, nothing but good things to say about Schwab. I loved working there, loved the people, had a lot of really interesting, challenging positions. And at the time in my life when I was there, for the vast majority of it, it was absolutely what I was meant to be doing at that phase of my life. And one of the things that I keep referencing Career Crossroads, but I hope you don't mind, there was this framework that we used. It was the 4 S's. It's survival, stability, success, and significance. And it's kind of, if you think about a pyramid, it's if you think about it, it's as we go through our career, first it's about survival. Like, what am I doing? How do I pay the rent? How do I feed myself? You're just trying to get started. And then there's stability, and, which is, okay, I've kind of figured out what I'm doing. This is at least true for me. I think it's generally true for a lot of people. And you get to stability, you know what you're doing. You're able to kind of like, support yourself, so on and so forth. And the success is where you're really trying to, I think, build your career, build your reputation, you're, financially becoming more successful. And then there's significance. And the reason why this really resonated with me was because I was feeling like I was moving, back towards, before I made this pivot that we've been talking about, I was feeling like I was moving from that success box or triangle, if you're thinking about a pyramid, to significance. And it was really helpful to have that diagram. I remember that kind of struck me, just to have that up in front of me and say, oh my gosh, this clearly articulates what I'm going through. And therefore other people must be going through it too, which is, at the time that I was at Schwab, you were at Schwab, it was the right place for me to be. But until it wasn't, until it was time for me to make a change and find something else to do. And that was moving for me from success to significance. So that was another kind of key learning, and again, gave me permission to know that it's okay to go from one phase of your career to another. It takes some navigating, it takes some effort, but it's okay. You have permission to do so.
And I think for a lot of people may not think they have that permission. I might let my partner or spouse down. My kids might think I'm off the rocker, whatever. My parents will be disappointed. My professional peers and network will, smirk and think less of me or whatever. It's the inside that yearning for change, and as you articulated here, going from success and with the permission to pursue significance. It's a courageous act, Eric.
I didn't do it alone. I did it through the program. I did it through support from my family, and from, my network through you. It took time, but at least knock on wood, there was some fruit to be born at the end of it.
Yeah. And when you look back, and I know you personally and been nothing but a good friend to me over the years. And it's been a really inspirational journey for me to see, because I don't think many people, even with the risk appetite that you have, that you, as you described, would even still do what you've done and landed, and you've made some changes in your life so that you can have this new career and this shift. I just think that's really it's compelling. It's not for everyone, but I think if people who've listened to this episode, I hope you can come away with the inspiration that Eric is sharing here about how he did it. And it took time, 6 years for Eric. It wasn't overnight. It wasn't in a month. There were a lot of, I'm guessing, ups and downs and twists and turns in the process, and walking down one hallway in this time of your life and coming to a dead end. The door won't open. You got to turn around and come back and go up another stairwell, go figure something else out. And that's part of it. What would you say have been the big learnings about the process of making the shift in your life and career?
Probably a couple things. One of them is it's not linear. I think you were just kind of alluding to that, but in reflecting back on it, it's easy to make it sound linear, but it certainly wasn't. There were a lot of dead ends. There were a lot of, oh shit moments. That's all part of the process. I think for all of us, all the time, even if we're not looking to make a career change. But for me, that was certainly the case, that it wasn't linear, but that you just try to keep, if there's maybe one of the things I've learned throughout my career is that, trust the process, just do a little something every day. And over time, that'll pay off. It may not seem like it on a day-to-day basis, but before you know it, a few years have gone by and you're in a different place and you're in a better place. So I think that would be it. And then I think the other one, which is related again, is that notion that for me, it was a very gradual process, and then it'll happen all at once. That sudden change isn't going to happen if you haven't done all the work to lead up to it, for yourself.
You've got to prepare yourself, even though if you don't quite know what is coming. And it's, I'm glad you alluded to that. Do something every day. A couple of us finance guys here, the power of compounding, I think is really valuable. And just, I totally agree with that notion of do something every day. Mm-hmm. Whatever the period frequency is, but in your case, it was do something every day, and that ship will turn, doors will be opened, new network, people in your network will be able to open your eyes or make introductions that could really be life changing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so cool to watch you kind of go through all this, and you land at a role that just fills up your cup and lights you up. I'll bet you don't have any problem getting out of bed now to go to work, do you?
No. No, I enjoy it. It's a little bit easier now that I'm working, in one room away from my bedroom. But
aren't we all?
Yeah. But no, absolutely. It just feels maybe one last thing is maybe work was kind of in a different compartment from the rest of my life. Everything felt very compartmentalized before, and now it just feels like it's all part of my life. It's all one big compartment, and everything fits inside of it.
Well, with that, we'll put a bow on things. I'm happy to hear that. Really happy to hear that for you. Congratulations. That's absolutely wonderful. I like to ask my guests this question. What would be, and maybe you've just said it and you want to reiterate it, but maybe there's something we haven't covered that you'd like to add. What would be one thing you would recommend that people could do and implement today to get moving on their journey to better alignment?
How do you get to that? What's really core to me? What's really important to me? And how did I know that the work that I was getting myself into was really what I wanted to do? So there was a lot of self-reflection there. And I think maybe the one piece of advice I would give for people like me who tend to be a little bit more introspective would be to don't be afraid to talk to others, ask for support, ask for advice. Let others help you understand yourself better, if that makes sense. And I think that's what talking with you, Career Crossroads, talking with others, loved ones, friends, to get to that, like, this is what I want, that in and of itself also takes quite a bit of time and effort. And you don't have to go it alone. There's there's a lot of support out there.
Yeah, I think that's a phenomenal point. Don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help and get feedback and support. It can be lonely. Try not to make it lonely, and find your community and find people who can support you and help you through the process and be there for you. Where can people find you, and tell us how they can check out the Yosemite River Alliance, or track you down and see what you're up to and get in touch?
Thanks. Yeah, it's www.yosemitirivers.org. So check it out. You'll see me on there under staff. And otherwise, email me. I'm on LinkedIn, Eric G. Riemer, and you should be able to find me there.
Perfect. There you go. Well, if you're interested in learning more about Eric or what he's been up to, or like to just connect with him in general, there you go. I'll add those contact points into the show notes. But Eric, thank you so much for giving us your time for this conversation. And thank you, listeners, for giving us your time to hear some strategies and one person's experience going from the corporate ladder within financial services into a new career in a nonprofit in a space that Eric is deeply passionate about. And I think when I just going through the notes that popped up to me in this conversation, things that like jumped out to me is sometimes we change, and it's okay that things have to change because we changed. And, at the time, Eric, when he was working in financial services, he was where he wanted to be at that time, but life shifts, and it's okay to recognize that and make the changes that you need to make. One that I thought was really good is around this notion of flipping limiting beliefs. Limiting beliefs are things we tell ourselves that may or may not be true. I'm not smart enough. I'm not capable enough. I don't know how to get things done, whatever it is, and flip them around into the opposite. And I am smart enough. I am capable enough, and use that as a starting point, right? And I think that is really, really interesting. The pyramid that Eric talked about was survival at the base level and moving up into stability, into success as you evolve your career, and ultimately into a level of significance. Change is not linear, and it does take a while and then happens all at once. And I think that's something that for all of us to keep in mind. And don't be afraid to talk to others. I know that can be daunting, and you have to, depending on where you work in your industry, you might have to be a little careful about who you're sharing some of your confidential interests and future career ambitions. But there are people out there. And I know part of what we do at More is we have our own community of people like Eric who are going through changes and walking that path with you, which can be very, very supportive. If this conversation resonated with you, I invite you to check out our website. We've talked about More quite a bit today. It was not intended to be a commercial, but I'm thrilled that Eric brought up some of the key points that really were impactful for him. Our website is bemorealigned.com. That's the home of More. And it's what I like to say, it's a destination for accomplished professionals who've been successful, but know something no longer fits. And we exist, that is More, for these crossroads to help you move beyond autopilot and get radically honest with yourself to build a life that's aligned with who you are now, maybe not 10 years ago. I'd love to hear from you if you want to reach out about ideas for the show or guest ideas. You want to have some feedback from me, you can reach me at hello@bemorealigned.com. And remember, life doesn't wait for the perfect moment. It waits for the moment you decide to stop settling. When your status quo feels like a status no, it's time to listen and act. I'm AJ Jones. Until next time, stay honest, stay aligned, and keep answering the call.